It's a problem, and it's been getting worse. I think that's very important to say. So you just said that you did this program 18 years ago saying that there was a problem. Well, 18 years ago, the difference was 45 to 1. The average worker earned 45 times less than CEOs. Today, it's 180. So have these CEOs become that much more productive, or has something changed in terms of...
Maybe it was wrong before. It could be that they...
Sure, but this is about corporate governance. I think it's very important not to sort of criminalize this as though this is sort of just bad behavior. We have to ask, what have we allowed in a particular type of capitalism? Because let's not forget there's varieties of capitalism. So we're talking about shareholder, driven capitalism versus something called stakeholder capitalism. So Huawei, #1 company in the world in telecoms, is a cooperative and doesn't have this big difference. Ericsson as well. So, these are companies that have decided to boost share prices, to boost stock options, to boost executive pay. That's a particular decision related to corporate governance, and we have to question this corporate governance model.
Right. Sam, you come from a slightly more libertarian angle. I'm assuming you'll say it is up to the shareholders who own the company to decide what the remuneration is. Am I right?
You are right, but I think a more interesting question is Mariana right? Is this increase in the ratio simply because shareholders have become more lazy? Maybe these committees have become better at giving themselves money? Or perhaps it's because things like globalization mean that having a good executive is more important now than it was 20 years ago. In fact, we can look at the evidence. We can look at the share price changes when CEOs either die or leave their companies suddenly, and we can see whether that's changed more dramatically in the last couple of years than it was before. And it turns out, when we look at the evidence, that over not just the last 20 years, but over the last 50 years, there's been a very steady upward change in the importance of a CEO to a company's value.
You're not telling me, though, that these people need to be paid. So they may be worth a great deal, but you don't need to pay them that in order to get them to do the job. I mean,
so
Martin Sorrell
earns in 45 minutes. In 45 minutes, Martin Sorrell earns what the average worker earns in a year. So that's not excessive.
The importance of a CEO is absolutely huge to a firm. If you were a Sony or a Samsung 15 years ago, Samsung decided to invest in smartphones. Sony didn't. Samsung's now much larger than Sony because it made that right call. But CEOs, the decisions they make matter enormously. And we look at share price changes. When Angela Arendt stepped down from Burberry, it was an unexpected move. Burberry lost £500 million in value from that one day.
Okay, so answer that one specifically, because that is actually quite interesting, isn't it? So you're not going to dispute the fact that they make a big difference to corporations, presumably?
Many companies that have this excessive difference, and I do think it's excessive, have not, during the time that this pay difference has increased, become more productive, produce better products. In fact, if you just look at the pharmaceutical industry...
It's not a question of the company, it's a question of the executive. Is the executive more important now than they were 20 years ago? And because of things like globalization, the answer is yes.
So this goes back to our theory of where wealth comes from. So the stakeholder model doesn't say that executives are not important. It just admits that there's other people that are also important. For example, the workers, who do sit on the board in many parts of the world. This isn't just a big idea that Theresa May had, Scandinavia, in Germany and Austria, where I was just last week. This is an admission that there's different collective actors that take part in making companies successful. So this is not about executives not being important.
If you're right, then all stock markets, all institutional investors with billions of pounds on the line, but other people's money and their own money, they're wrong. They're wrong in when a good CEO leaves, judging that that firm is less valuable.
Adam Smith, that your institute was named after, the Adam Smith Institute, what he meant by the free market was free from rent. Free from rent. What we're actually talking about is massive rent seeking.
Look, let's go back to
I'll tell you what.
You're talking about value creation as though these executives have, over time, become more important for the creation of value.
And that's what the evidence tells us.
Right, okay.
It doesn't. Wait. Become very value extractive.
Getting a good CEO matters more now than it used to.
We've got about 90 seconds left. I did want to get into the practicalities of... So let's just accept for a moment that your objective is to narrow the gap and to get executive pay down. We can carry on afterwards. Do you think the kind of things you've heard about, publishing ratios, putting a worker on the remuneration committee, do you think that matches the scale of it?
Well, it's not a worker. It's trade unions, yes. They are very important in negotiating and also thinking about future investments. They should be on the boards, not just to limit the pay. This is also where it always sounds very defensive. Think of it more offensive. Think of the opportunities that are needed. So when profits of companies are reinvested in the future, so in productive capacity, in innovation, this is good for society as a whole.
Yeah.
And so workers on the board would be fighting for that, as opposed to things like share buybacks, which have increased
Workers on the board
massively, and
want-
that's
Workers, I think
rent-seeking.
workers on the board are terrible policy. When it's been done in Germany, it's failed massively. One of the big reasons Volkswagen went down was because the board's atmosphere was poisonous. The chief executive of Volkswagen collaborated with the union representatives and drove up costs. It was a huge failure. Instead, we should be encouraging firms to give their workers shares in those firms, so that the workers have a stake in the firm's profits as much as its shareholders do.
The other specific idea, publishing ratios, does it carry the risk that if you publish the ratio of the executive pay to the average, they'll try and outsource all the low-paid staff, as lots of companies do, in order that the average pay of the remaining staff looks higher? Is that not? This area is replete with perverse incentives, isn't it, Mariana?
So again, why should they publish these, payments and the differences? Not because this is criminal behavior, but because this is an indicator, perhaps, of something that's happening in these companies that is problematic. But what we should actually be then focusing on is what's happening in these companies. Are they investing their profits in the future growth? And we have record level hoarding, record level financialization, which is, again, using profits just to boost your stock options, which is the main way that these executives get paid. Again, it's not that executives aren't good. This isn't good, good guy, bad guy thing. This is about...
It's a question of how important the executive is to the well-being of the
There's
firm.
no evidence that
there
has
is plenty of
increased.
evidence. I'm
Sam,
happy
you're a
to show it to you.
libertarian. You're generally seen as on the right of politics, but libertarian. Are you worried by the drift of where society's going? Because clearly, populism, governments coming in everywhere are saying, we've had enough, we're not going to take it anymore, we mean business.
Well, I am,
now.
but we keep hearing about post-truth politics. I mean, this is somewhere the evidence is very clear that executives matter a lot. And what the government's doing, maybe Theresa May believes in what she's doing. I think more likely is that she's trying to win some votes. And it's really sad that very, very few people, even executives themselves, because they're worried about how it looks to the public, are willing to stand up and say, just look at the evidence, look at the importance of good CEOs because of things like globalization now to the well-being of their firms.
This is a tautology. I'll just say it's a tautology.
Okay.
They're getting paid more, so they're more valuable. That's wrong.
That's not what we're saying. We're saying the value
very
of the
much
firm
indeed.
is
Thank you.
changing more when the CEOs die
Thanks.
now.
Okay.